shortly.
And welcome to today's session of the Transport Select Committee. Today we're looking at the issue of volumetric concrete mixes and road weight limits and other related matters. Before we begin, could I invite each of the witnesses to just give your name and organisation, please, for the purposes of our records. Start with Mr. Leese.
Okay, yeah, I'm Chris Leese. I work for the Mineral Products Association, which is the trade association that represents the mineral products industry. It does what it says on the tin. For example, cement, aggregates, asphalt and concrete, employing around 80,000 people in our industry. Specific to today, we represent around 70% of the UK concrete industry, including both large and small operators. Indeed, a number of our member companies also operate VCMs.
Thank you. Mr. Payne?
Matthew Payne, a member of the BSA, and have a volumetric concrete company, started in 2008. Currently have 13 volumetric vehicles. We have just invested 2 years ago in a plant and have 5 drum mixers and 23 employees.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Morning. Chris Smith, I'm the chairman of the BSA. I also own Mix and Make Concrete, which is the oldest volumetric company in the country. We have 25 vehicles operating across the south and Yorkshire. I'm also the owner of IHS, which is a manufacturing company in Sheffield that build our trucks, which they're exclusively UK built.
Thank you, and we're grateful to all three of you for your time and evidence this morning. If I could start off by just trying to get an understanding of the scale of this sector and the number of traffic movements that flows from it, just to help, as I put things in context. Mr. Smith, could maybe come to you first. So how many vehicles are there and how many movements do we have on our roads from them?
We estimate there's about 1,000 VCMs in the country. That's from top to bottom, from Cornwall up to Scotland. About 300 or 350 companies. So they've all averages about 2 trucks or 1 or 2 trucks. Myself and Matt are quite unusual to have as many trucks as we've got. Basically, ma and pa firms. Yeah, it's just husband and wife companies. 1 or 2 trucks. The husband probably drives and the wife takes the phone calls. Actual share of the market, I think it's estimated about 10% of the whole ready-mix market is done by volumetrics. It's never going to be much more because we're the retail end of this sector. Ready-mix have got a massive place in the market for those big projects where it's lorries in all day long. That's not what we do. So over the years, 45 years now, this sector has been in existence. Mixman actually started it with a man with a shovel, stand on the back of what looked like a little tipper with a mixer on the back. And it's just progressed and automated to where we are now. Actual lorry movements, Matt, any idea on that? We might have to come back on that one. Yeah. we had a report by Regenerous in 2017 to look at the environmental and this sort of thing, but it's quite a big report, and it's not a number that gets chucked around a lot.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Leese, from your side of the sector, how many vehicles do you have and sort of typical number of movements?
I don't know if we're from the other side of the sector. I think we're all part of the same sector. But the ready-mix market in the UK is worth perhaps around between 18 and 20 million cubic metres. We measure our product in cubic metres as opposed to tonnes, but I think the guys would probably agree with me. If you multiply by, say, 2.6, you'd come to tonnes. Ready-mix concrete is produced in batch plants from around 1,000 sites around the UK. So there'll be, I can safely say there'll be a ready-mix concrete batching plant in every constituency. So it's very much a local material. Average delivery distance is probably less than 10 miles. It is a little bit difficult to be precise in terms of truck numbers, but the best information we have is that there are around 4,000 to 4,200 truck mixers operating in the UK. I think elsewhere you've potentially been informed that that number is much greater, but it's around 4,200. That's the best information I've got. I think it's fair to say that in the past couple of decades, or indeed longer, volumetrics have established a place in certain segments of the concrete market, and as we've just heard, maybe then comprise around 20% of the total fleet. We don't have a problem as MPA with volumetric trucks. As I said, some of our members actually operate volumetrics, so we're not anti-volumetrics. Both methods of delivery have their advantages and disadvantages, but we compete in the same segments. In certain segments of the concrete market, both forms of delivery compete, and what MPA is seeking is a level playing field.
Thank you, and we'll want to explore all those issues this morning. At the outset, I'm just trying to gauge the scale of this issue. And I appreciate construction projects will come in all shapes and sizes. But just to help inform our discussion, if you took a mid-size project, how many movements from both VCMs and the truck makers would you expect to see in a typical day on the local roads leading up to that? And over what sort of duration?
I think that's all project dependent on what they're using as their building material, whether it's forms and things that they are filling with concrete, or whether it's things that they're doing bricks and blocks. So it's all going to be dependent on what the site is. But like a general house would be probably 30 cube of concrete, which on an 8 metre drum mixers, 8/16, so 4 movements in and out in that day to deliver it.
For one house? For
one house.
Right.
And then there would also be, the majority of the time, they would pump that, so there'd be a 5th lorry there to pump it as well. Again, seeing you, they won't always use a pump. Some of them will use a digger bucket or straight pour it. My personal point of view is a pump is better because it makes it easier for them. But a general house, probably 5 movements.
So what we'll want to explore in later questions is the impact on road surfaces and strength from repeated movements at different weights. But we'll turn to that in a moment. But in terms of the issue is obviously the weight limit regulations. Mr. Smith, could you just give me an idea of, you say you've got about 1,000, well, not you personally, but in the sector there's 1,000 VCMs. How many are above the proposed new weight limit? Are they all above, or is it a certain proportion?
Since 2018, when the new rules come in, saying no new vehicles could be actually put on the road at the higher weight, the market virtually collapsed in new vehicles. So most of the vehicles out there now are under 12 years old. One of the things they actually put in that new regulation was a cut-off at 12 years. So any lorry that got to 12 years old couldn't be used anymore at the higher weights, which is a bit of a sting because we don't do that many miles a year anyway. And we have the same regulations on safety and MOTs and inspections as any HGV on the road does, which obviously prior to 2018 we didn't. We welcomed them when they came in. Yeah, it got rid of a cowboy element that could just run any lorry how they wanted to. So, I mean, on deliveries, I have 25 trucks. They're not all on the road every day. We'd probably do between 20 and 40 deliveries a day. The sector we specialise is a lot smaller. We normally do a lot of extensions and a lot of underpinning jobs, especially in the London area. So we might only do sort of like 2 deliveries to one address. Might be the foundations for the extension, and a week or 2 later we'll go back and just do the floor. So we're not personally involved with these big projects. Like Matt gets involved a bit more because he's got ready-mix lorries, and obviously the MPA are doing massive sites where there's hundreds of movements a day sometimes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, we've got written down here that they think that the volumetric, obviously since 2018, we've seen quite a few struggles with COVID and such things, but the industry was worth 55 million to the manufacturers pre-2018, and then after that it's been worth about 9 million a year in new lorry sales. So the lorry sales have dropped dramatically, going on the weight. And there's various companies who now operate the newer lorries at the lower weight. A company called Custom Concrete, and he invested in a new lorry because he thought with its lower weights he needed to put another lorry on the road to keep up with the demand. So that's one way it has affected it.
Thank you. Jack, if you could
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to first ask you about waste. And we've heard about situations where traditional drum mixers basically have gone solid because of the situation wasn't really appropriate, and it might have been better to use a VCM in some of those circumstances. Do you think that actually there are more potential opportunities where VCMs would be better suited because, you know, maybe they've got to wait for a period of time to access a site, or, you know, there's specific circumstances which means traditional drum mixers aren't really appropriate, but they're having to put more pressure on using those at the moment because of these restrictions on VCMs? Do you think there could be actually more opportunities to reduce waste and reduce some of the impact of, because those vehicles obviously are completely destroyed if it goes solid? Do you think there's an opportunity to use VCMs more to address this issue of waste? If you want to go.
May I come in? We did skip over the sort of the vehicle movements associated with. I will answer your question, and no doubt these guys will have something to say as well. But we skipped over the question of vehicle movements with truck mixers. As I said, there's approximately, just to go back on that, around 4,200 trucks on the road. You could say perhaps the average truck mixer does between 5 and 6 loads a day. It'll depend whether it's in London or whether it's in a rural area. So that would give some idea of the number of movements every day associated with truck mixers. On the point that you raise about waste, the BSA suggests that because of shelf life issues, ready-mix concrete is wasted and goes to landfill. Well, you may have seen in my biography that before I started working for the Mineral Products Association, I was managing director of one of the largest ready-mix producers in the UK for 9 years, and my experience with ready-mix concrete goes back a lot longer than that. I would dispute the fact, actually, that waste is an issue with truck mixers. Even if it was a significant issue, it's a fact that the huge proportion of concrete waste, if we can call it that, is recycled in the UK. UK has been very, very successful indeed as a nation in terms of recycling, and almost 100% of demolition waste is recycled back into the value stream, if you like.
Recycle a drum mixer that's solid.
That is I was going to come to that. That is an incredibly rare event, incredibly rare. If I can just continue, so ready-mix concrete is, firstly, it's batched according to the customer's requirements. We don't batch exactly on site like VCMs can, but if a customer says they need 2 cubic metres, then we can deliver 2 cubic metres. And customers, in our experience, are generally fairly adept at ordering the amount that they want. Travel distances are on average less than 10 miles, so it's very, very unusual for a delivery journey to take anything like 2 hours, although it can happen, for example, in London due to traffic conditions. But concrete can be retarded. You can use admixtures to retard it, so it doesn't necessarily go off in 2 hours. And even if material gets returned to the concrete batching plant, with modern batching systems, it's actually possible to batch on top of the material that's remaining in the drum of the truck mixer. So that waste, if you like, becomes part of the next load. I could expand further on that, but there are all sorts of things that the industry does to prevent the occurrence of waste concrete. Where that does occasionally happen, then in my experience, concrete on the plant, waste concrete, is allowed to cure, and then there's a demand from local recyclers to take it away and crush it and turn it into aggregate. So I can't think of an occasion when concrete waste went into landfill. It would always either be used, reused, or recycled.
Matt, if you want to go first.
Sorry, just back to the movement thing as you brought it up again. The movement, a drum mixer is loaded at a plant and has a specific amount on it, 1 to 8 metres, goes and drops that load and then comes back to the plant. So if he's doing a 2 metre job, he would go, do the job, come back, load up, go to the next job. The beauty of the volumetric is that it can carry everything on board and it does a milk run, so it doesn't need to keep coming back to the plant. And some days, you know, in a 10-mile radius, a drum mixer might be doing 70 miles to a volumetric's 20 miles because he doesn't need to keep coming back to the plant to reload, whereas a volumetric can just do the milk run, which is what they're designed to do. And on the waste thing, volumetrics, very good for out-of-hours work, things where there are time constraints. We have a member of the BSA who did one in the prison and they had a problem, so the prison was on lockdown for 2 hours. He's in a volumetric, he just locks himself in the cab and he waits, so there's no concrete to go off. But if there had been a drum mixer in there, he would have lost the load and then he would have lost the drum, as you alluded to. And I do agree with Chris. I don't think that much concrete goes into landfill. It is recycled, but the recycled aggregates and crushed concrete he's talking about is normally from demolition sites where the concrete has finished its lifespan of 10, 20 years as a yard or as a building, and then is recycled. It's not brand new concrete that is wasted to then be recycled. I'm sure not many of you know, but to produce a ton of cement makes about a ton of carbon. So if you're wasting a cubic metre of concrete, if it was a footing mix, there might be 200 kilos of cement in there. That's 200 kilos of carbon that has been produced to recycle that into a crushed concrete as opposed to gone into construction.
So Chris, are the situations at the moment then where basically because of these restrictions we are seeing an over-dependence on using drum mixers as opposed to some of those alternatives?
I mean, from the customer's point of view, I mean, volumetrics or mix-on-site operations have been around about 45 years. So most customers, when they're looking at a job, most customers will think, right, that's a volley job, that's a ready-mix job. Yeah, there's obviously a crossover in the middle where they get it wrong or they're not educated enough to know what the alternatives are. We turn work down sometimes daily when people are ringing up and saying, oh, we got this job here, it's a 50, 100 metre job, and we say, well, it's not for us. We're not geared up for that. That's a wholesale job. Give the ready mix a ring. We are one of the ready mix firms. So we've got to be careful what we do take on. And again, the ready mix drum guys don't want to be going to do 1 metre jobs or 2 metre jobs. They'll do them because they don't lose money on them because they'll charge part load. So every ready mix load that goes out will make the same profit as if it went out loaded or just 1 metre, because they'll charge them for the fresh air in that mixer. So but 1 metre jobs can be aggravation. They know they're probably going to be a DIYer, and when they get there, they're not ready to dump it straight away and run. So most customers will pick the right tool nowadays.
So in terms of, Matt, you mentioned about some of the environmental savings, and particularly emissions and the reduction in some of those carbon emissions as a particular factor in this. How much saving environmentally do you think can be achieved by using a volumetric mixer as opposed to using some of the more traditional methods?
I'd have to look up here, but they do. They have written here some. I mean, one fact they've got here is the amount of water that it uses to wash out the mixer. Traditionally a drum mixer is washed out at the end of the day with about 1,000 litres of water. A volumetric is about 150 litres. Granted, a lot of that water is recycled from both the volumetric and the drum mixer, but there is a big, issue there. I don't actually know the figures on the amount of carbon that would be saved by using volumetrics.
You particularly illustrated how going back and forth to the plant with a drum mixer obviously is using a lot more fuel, more emissions than going from job to job, isn't it?
There was a thing that was done by Regenerous, and it did actually say that the amount of, and it was in the millions of kilometres of extra road movements that were needed to carry on going at the lower weight. I mean, the average load side for a volumetric is sort of 2.9 cubic metres, and that was then obviously doing the milk run, and they were saying that over an extra 1 million kilometres would be needed if, with the lower weight, they'd have to go back and reload again during the day.
Chris, do you want to
Yeah, yes, quite a lot of things actually there. I think on the waste point, I don't think there's any point in kind of getting into tit for tat, and I'm sure you wouldn't thank us for that. But I just can't agree with the points that have been made about waste in ready mix. It just isn't a case, and I think that we're looking at we're playing to exceptions. The one time when a truck mixer was in a prison and the prison went into lockdown. As a general rule, on general deliveries that either type of vehicle would make, a ready mix truck will not incur waste. It's something that the industry fights, because obviously waste is wasted cost, it's lost profit. So it's something that the industry fights very hard against. On the point about water, then again, in my direct experience, having been responsible for over I think right at the beginning of my career, of 400 or 500 ready-mix plants. I honestly can't remember, but it was a lot of concrete plants. The water for the drum mixer, yes, at the end of the day, it does have to be washed out. The industry avoids using mains water wherever it can. Firstly, because it recognises its environmental responsibilities, so it seeks to reduce the use of mains water.
Steps and the sector taking to improve the environmental.
Secondly, relating to cost. So you would find if you went to many ready-mix plants that water is recycled. So a lot of effort and I think you mentioned that in fairness. A lot of water is recycled within the plant, and indeed a lot of plants also harvest rainwater to avoid the use of mains water. So the industry has taken steps to reduce the use of mains water, and certainly when I was in my previous employ, it was one of the KPIs that we had in the business, was the number of litres of water that was used per cubic metre of concrete that was produced. And we were successful in driving it down.
In terms of emissions, what sort of steps are being taken to reduce carbon emissions?
So in terms of carbon emissions, I think on the one hand, sometimes a volumetric solution will involve less journeys. Sometimes that is true, I agree. Sometimes it won't, and that's where we come into direct competition. Transport emissions are, of course, important and are recognised by the Mineral Products Association in its roadmap to beyond net zero that we've produced. I think transport emissions are around 7% of the total emissions from the concrete and cement industry. But that is all transport. That includes deliveries to plants, including the cement and aggregates deliveries to these guys' depots. So transport emissions are important, and our industry is beginning to invest or is beginning to explore alternative lower carbon solutions such as electric truck mixers, although the deployment of those is probably still a little distance away. But I think that it's important to recognise that if you increase the weight for a vehicle, the payload for a vehicle, then of course it's going to be more efficient. It will need to do less journeys. So a 38 tonne on 4 axles volumetric truck will have to do less journeys to a given job site than one running at 32. The same applies to truck mixers. And I think that brings us back to the MPA's key points. I know you asked about carbon, but I think that then leads to, well, if it's okay to increase, to 38 tonnes on 4 axles for volumetrics, then why not increase to 38 tonnes on truck mixers? Now, I know there are then other considerations like road wear, which you said you wanted to come to, and safety. But it comes to the hub of our point, which is what we're seeking, is a level playing field. If we can do 38 on VCMs, we compete directly with one another in certain market segments, then let's do 38 on truck mixers.
Anything further that you wanted to add, Chris? On
The level playing field is not the weight. 32 tonnes, a drum mixer at 32 tonnes can carry 8 cubic metres of any grade of concrete. Because the volumetric is carrying all the machinery and he's bringing the batching plant with him, he's at the disadvantage of at least 6 tonnes before he even gets on the road.
Right.
Because that's the difference. At 38 tonnes, a volumetric can carry 8 metres of any mix. Because we've got that disadvantage at the beginning of carrying the plant and the machinery with us, that a ready-mix drum mixer has got sitting in his yard, big piece of plant to make that concrete. So we're not asking for any more meterage advantage. We're just asking for a level playing field on 8 cubic metres of any strength of concrete, of load. Yeah. So I think it gets lost. Whose playing field will be on here? We'd rather be on the one where it's 8 metres for both. Yeah. Yeah.
There is a, may I, Chair? There is just another point on that. The BSA do make a point about the fact that volumetric trucks often carry a pump, and that, of course, does amount to extra weight on that vehicle. I would agree with the point that's been made. Pumps aren't, by any manner of means, always required. Carrying pumps on trucks isn't exclusive, actually, to VCMs. Back in the day, and it was actually before my day in ready mix, some truck mixers carried pumps, but the traditional ready mix industry, if we can put it that way, shunned the installation of pumps on the back of truck mixer type vehicles simply because it represented lost payload.
Thank you. Now, Carl and then Fabian want to ask a couple of quick supplementaries. Carl.
Thank you, Chairman, and I do need to quick. I'll declare that I have met Matt and Chris Smith previously. Chris Leese hasn't had the pleasure, nor have I, of meeting before today. But Chris, I'm going to come straight to you, and some quick answers, I think, if that's okay. Very quickly, what's the cost of a volumetric cement mixer vehicle compared to a normal drum one? If you had to go out and buy one today.
I can tell you how much it will cost to buy a truck mixer. These guys can tell you very easily how much it will cost to buy a volumetric. So to buy a truck mixer, about £150,000, £160,000.
Okay.
A standard volumetric, about 250.
Yeah, 250.
And my truck, which has got a pump on, about 300.
So if we're looking at a level playing field, there's a difference in cost there in vehicles to operate. Just yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. So your organisation that you represent, you have some that run both types of vehicles, but I guess that the vast majority of the people you represent, the businesses, run normal drum, as you would call them, normal drum mixers.
That's correct.
Okay. So if we come on to actually the costs of environmentally friendly policies that you run, you admitted, I think, already that it would, whether you wash it during the day or not, at the end of the day you'll use around about 1,000 litres of water. Wherever that may come from, I guess, virtue signalling, whether it's rainwater or it comes from the mains, you will use for each of those vehicles around 1,000 litres compared to 150 for volumetric.
Sorry, I don't know if 1,000 litres is correct. I would have to check that, but I would agree that yes, at the end of the day, any vehicle which has delivered concrete has to be washed down, and that consumes water.
Moving on to hypothetically, and prisons have been mentioned, should a drum mixer turn up at a site, potentially a prison, how long, even with additives, will concrete remain liquid and be able to be poured before it becomes solid?
Well, that's a question of how long is a piece of string, because it depends.
We mentioned 3 hours, or would it be 5 hours, or are you going to say longer?
Because it depends.
Let this answer, please. Thank you.
I'd like a quick answer, Chairman.
Because it depends. It depends on the additives that are used, but typically 2 to 3 hours.
Okay. If there was a lockdown in a prison for 5 hours and it became solid, what would be the cost then of replacing a drum on a drum?
You wouldn't
vehicle?
end up in those circumstances with a dead load, because truck mixer drivers carry additives in their cabs which they can put into the drum, which prevents the material from going solid. It is a disaster in the ready-mix industry, as these guys will know, if you have a load go off in the drum of a truck mixer. It is an incredibly rare occurrence.
But if it happens, and I'm talking hypothetically, what would be the cost? Is it replace the whole vehicle, or is it just replace the drum?
No, you replace the drum. In some circumstances, you might be able to break it out. In other circumstances, you would have to replace the drum. It is incredibly rare.
So on EVs, if you go down the EV route, we can talk about the weights of extra weight that you'd have for an EV drum concrete vehicle. Should that run out of electricity and it stops being able to turn its drum, would that be the same thing? You might be able to break it out, or you might have to renew the drum on the same type of vehicle.
Again, you'd kill the load. You'd use additives to kill the load
before
you got to the point, or seek somewhere where you could discharge it. Again, I have to say it's incredibly rare.
Fabian.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, Mr. Leese, I visited one of the plants that you used to work for, Cemex in Leeds, and one of the main issues that this was just last year. It's on the edge of my constituency, obviously, big employer, very important position there. One of the points they did actually raise was exactly that of traffic issues threatening their load. Now, like you, they said it was quite rare that this happened, and they tried to recall the vehicle back to the plant so they could discharge the load before it went off. But the very fact they mentioned it, I think, was quite significant as being one of the issues. Now, if I can just move on from that and get to my point, I recently had, I can't remember, it was two cubic meters of concrete delivered to line the basement floor of my own home in Leeds, and because the mixer lorry did not have a pump, we had to have another lorry pumping. So surely the fact that the volumetric concrete mixer lorries have the pump already installed, again, not just saves on extra journeys, but saves on extra vehicles.
I think.
I just wondered if you.
I think to the latter point. I think yes, there are occasions when it's absolutely right to use a volumetric truck, and no dispute of that whatsoever. And maybe your basement was just one such case. Pumps aren't always needed, so I think it's possible that you've maybe been led to believe that a pump has to follow a truck mixer around. That isn't true. In a lot of occasions, a truck mixer can get to exactly the same place that a volumetric truck can get to and pour the material directly into the footings. Sometimes a pump is required, sometimes we use a digger bucket, sometimes it might be a skip. Going back to the issue of material going off in drums, look, we deliver something like 16 to 18 million cubic metres a year, I've already told you. And I bet within that volume, if there would be less than a handful, if any, occasions when material has gone off in a drum and a truck and a drum has been lost as a result, because the industry, the whole sense of urgency that you find when you work in the ready-mix concrete industry comes from the fact that you are working with a product which is live and potentially can go off. But we've put all sorts of measures in place to avoid that happening. Admixtures, the ability to kill a load if there is a problem with the truck or a problem with the site. It's always in the back of the mind of the drivers that they have a live product that can go off. Of course it is. And it's a good thing that it is, because that then drives them to make, in the unlikely event that there is a problem, it drives them to make the right decisions before things do go terminally wrong.
I have to say Cemex were very impressive, so I just want to put that on record, but thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Greg.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, gentlemen. Can we turn back, it was referenced in some of your opening answers to the 2018 regulations that were introduced. Can you, so the committee is very clear, each give your view on how those changes, the new regulations, affected the whole sector, the practical implications that came about because of that, and were there any benefits to them, or were they all disbenefits? Perhaps if we start, you, Chris.
Thank you. Prior to 2018, we were classed as a mobile engineering plant because the whole reason for that lorry being there was the machinery in the back, and it wasn't delivering goods. You'd actually go to a site and you couldn't even sell some sand to the guys on the site. Everything had to go through the mixer. That was held up in court up and down the country every time that the VOSA or DVSA tried to prosecute. The judges said, no, these guys are in this sector. Then Europe also had the same problem with loads of lorries with this sort of thing. They started a review. It came out of that we would have to be sort of like put into the box of HGVs. Kicking and screaming maybe, but there was an element prior to 18 of rogues and cowboys, because you buy a lorry, you was on the road, you didn't need an operator's license. BSA was formed in 2007 to sort of try and bring some regulation. We had, in the early days, 2007 to 2010, we had direct talks with the government, and in the end, the government guys from the ministry said, no, we were told to stop talking, we'll settle this in court. So in the early days, we tried to bring some regulations in with them. 2018, yeah, it was a bit scary for the guys in the industry at the time because we were unregulated, but we've taken them all on board, no problem. Operator's licenses, tachographs, walk-around checks, 6 weekly checks, sorry. So we've taken anything that HGV has to do, we have to do. The only thing that was recognised was the equipment that we carried. Either just a normal volumetric with that sort of 6 tonnes, or my trucks that carry the pump. We got a tail weight of 21 tonnes. So it's a lot of weight there from a ready-mix lorry which probably weighs 12. Yeah, a 12 tonne, it's just an empty vessel to deliver a product. Yeah, so that was the thing that sort of scared us with a 10-year rule, because we'd already tried prior to 18 to bring the weight down on these sort of trucks. But they have to be sturdy. They're carrying a lot of material, so you can't start cutting down on the safety side of it. I think since 2018 or 2017, about a tonne has been taken out of the vehicles by using lighter materials. They've tried using fiberglass for the cement hoppers and things. That wasn't very successful. But so moving forward, we are where we are. The 12-year rule was a bit of a surprise, saying after 12 years you had to scrap these lorries. Although we're going through all the same safety checks that everybody else is. A tipper or a ready-mix lorry can just go for 20 years. So people have to... Most of the 32-tonne lorries that are on the road now are because operators of the VCMs have got to their 12-year rule with their lorries, and they can't be used anymore. You can use them down at 32 tonnes, but because the older ones were heavier, they get penalised twice. On these 32-tonne lorries, you can't get 8 metres. You'd be lucky to get 7 metres. Matt runs 13 VCMs, and 2 of them are the lightweight ones, and I'll let him explain the disadvantages of running them.
Just going to your question, the law that was brought in 2018, I don't think any volumetric producer had an issue with those laws because they were safety bound. And as Chris said, I think the first volumetric was 1975, and they were classed as engineering plant because at the time it was drive to the job, spend 5 hours mixing the concrete, then drive back to the yard. Whereas now things have come on a lot more, and the mixing of the concrete is probably 2 minutes a cubic metre, so they are a lot quicker. So it was right that they came into line with HGVs, which I don't think anyone had a problem with. And as Chris said, MOTs, 6 weekly inspections, O licences, driver hours, all the rest of it. The one issue is that the lorries are heavier than a drum mixer. And that's the biggest issue we have, and that is why the Department for Transport gave us the extra weight, and there was a report done that showed that at the extra 20% weight that we have been given, there is no extra damage to the roads and things. But things that are safety related, there's no issues there whatsoever. And like Chris said, they've done a lot in the industry to try and make the lorries as light as possible, and everything they've done, they've managed to save about a tonne. Manufacturers have said they could get them lighter, but then there would be safety concerns. So, they've done all they can do.
I think we can all agree then that the additional regulation around driving licenses and all the other things was a good thing, and the point at issue is the weight limit. I can't say that I'm aware of any particular changes that we noticed in the marketplace following the 2018 decision, other than perhaps that the vehicles became much better regulated. There is one thing I would like to say, which is we're sort of almost talking as if the 8-metre truck mixer has kind of got it all. Actually, it's a fight with an 8-metre truck mixer, which is becoming the industry standard, to be able to carry 8 metres on a 4-axle truck mixer, because of the additional weight of various equipment that's put on there. So we have had to do things, our industry has had to do things with truck mixers like alloy wheels, for example, which sounds very cool on a truck mixer, but actually are there for weight saving. Composite drums is something else which has been looked at. And again, that's all about trying to save weight in order to be able to maximise payload. And I am aware that there are 8-wheel, 4-axle truck mixers on the road today which actually struggle to carry a maximum payload. So, truck mixers don't have it all their own way.
That's really helpful. Can I get in a little bit to this point around how light you can make a truck before it simply can't carry its payload? Because actually getting a ton out of a vehicle, it actually sounds pretty impressive on one level, but there are always innovators, there is always more science. You see it across all modes of transport and vehicles and plant, that there's always another way. How much further do you think the industry could push it to get the vehicles as light as possible, to in some way comply with a lower weight limit were the temporary uplift to be taken away, or does that uplift need to be made permanent?
I'm not an engineer, but I would say that they've done everything they can. I mean, they've started using hard ox steel in the bodies, or some of the manufacturers using aluminium. Again, like Chris said earlier, the aluminium lorries I don't think will last 15 years like an old steel lorry will. You're probably going to get 6 years out of an aluminium body. But apart from things like that, I don't think there's too much more you can do. The chassis manufacturers used to, they have stronger chassis because they used to be able to run at design weight of 44 tons. But if they're running at a lower weight, they produce a lighter chassis, again, so it has more flex in the body. But unless technology and things move on, I don't think there's much more they can do. The drum mixers have been trying to make a lighter drum for years. And as Chris said, they've tried fiberglass drums, which didn't last very long. They've tried different plastic water tanks, and it always seems to come back to, trying to reinvent the wheel. So they sort of stick with what they're at. And I think the same with volumetrics. That we or the manufacturers have tried their hardest, and I don't think there's too much more they can actually legitimately do without compromising on safety.
That's clear, Chris?
I think prior to 18, it wasn't sort of carte blanche, we don't care what it weighs anyway. So they were, in their way of building them, were conscious of the weight before that. So when they were told to go back and sort of try again, that's when they squeezed the extra ton out. So they were as light as they could. They were as light as they thought they could be beforehand, although it wasn't the most important thing because design weights were heavier. But they went back and sort of redesigned it. So a tear weight of a volumetric now, 17, 18, 16?
Empty, they're about 15.
Right, so a tear weight, and against 12. So they're down on that low capacity to carry it. And I said earlier, mine run at 44 tons. And Highways England done a big investigation in 2017 that said 5 axles at 44 were perfectly fine. I mean, they're not a white elephant. I mean, there's loads of lorries out there at that weight. Arctics, there's hundreds of thousands of Arctics at 44 tons. Big cranes and big pumps, they all run them sorts of weight. So it's not as if it's the only thing in the country at that. And again, it's got the pump on board. We do, going sideways slightly, we do about 40 jobs a day. Average is about 3 jobs per lorry. Because we're carrying the pump, we've got to get there, run the lines out. So, and we do a little milk round with the load. Probably reload on average once a day. And that's across London and the South East.
Slightly off topic, but it's on the weight issue. Presumably, as we approach 2050 and petrol and these presumably are all diesel, won't be permitted anymore. These things, that sort of weight's never going to run on a battery. So presumably, hydrogen is the preferred option going forwards, which actually might help on weight.
It's like the weight thing. I mean, we're waiting for the next big thing to come along. We like the drum mixers. We could probably end up running the truck itself on the batteries, but all the machinery runs on the PTO off of the main engine. So it's a bit of a catch-22. You might end up putting a donkey engine back on the the back of the truck just to run the machinery, and sort of that adds extra weight. There's another 1.5 tons or 2 tons of donkey engine.
Yeah. No, I understand that.
So talking about that, I mean, like you said, they have moved things forward, and I do agree with you that hydrogen is probably the way forward for construction vehicles in general and heavy industry. But I mean, the government have just allowed higher weight for battery operated trucks because the truck is heavier because of the battery. The same as our volumetric is heavier because it's taking the plant with it, is the same as the battery truck. So all we're asking for is to make the weight permanent instead of finishing.
Okay, can I? Sorry, yes,
may I? I think on the. I mean, we've talked a lot about the weight issue. Just on electric trucks, that is an issue that's coming down the line. The industry is testing electric truck mixers. I wouldn't claim to be an expert on them. They've arrived sort of since I left direct operational management, and the weight of the batteries does inevitably reduce payload. And I think that's, you know, if I can sort of bring it back then to kind of fair competition, and it's something we'll probably not agree on at this end of the table, but you know, our industry would be quite happy if we standardised on 38 tonnes on 4 axles, because that would assist in bringing in electric truck mixers, because at the moment the weight of the batteries is eating into payload, and that is an issue. It means more journeys for the same volume of concrete delivered, for example. So that is an issue that needs to be considered, and I think it just brings us back to, you know, the level playing field issue that I mentioned at the beginning.
Okay, I understand that. Can I just come back though to the point about road safety, wear and tear on the roads from heavier vehicles? Anyone that drives right now, and there are multiple factors as to the state of Britain's roads at the moment. A few winters of very bad weather, and Britain's roads aren't in a particularly great place at the moment for a lot of reasons. I know from my own constituency that suffers from more HGV movements than virtually any other with the construction of a particularly unpopular railway. That those movements do have a material effect on the state of the roads, in and out of compounds and so on. There are roads that look like the surface of the moon. Matt, I think you raised the point that there's been no evidence from VCMs impacting the roads. What was the study that proved that? What was the evidence base for that? Because heavy vehicles do have a bigger impact, unless they're running very low tyre pressures, which ain't very good for these vehicles on the roads, don't they?
Yes, no, I do agree with that, but Highways England specifically looked at this in 2017 on the operating weight of 4-axle volumetrics above 41 tonne. And I've got written here, they concluded that VCMs on 5 axles operating both within the UK and EU limits did have no adverse effect on the roads, and they recommended a reduction of weight to 38.4 for a 4-axle volumetric truck, because they thought at a higher weight there was an issue, but at 38.4 there was no extra issues or problems caused.
When was that done?
2017, Highways England.
May I?
Yeah, of course, please do.
Yeah, I'm briefed that recently the Roads Minister declined to extend the derogation for 2- and 3-axle electric HGVs, which has been brought in, to 4- and 6-axle electric HGVs on the grounds of road wear and tear. So it would seem to us that it would be deeply inconsistent to allow, we would argue, a much weaker claim for carbon savings and efficiencies from VCMs, and not to allow such a derogation for electric vehicles, which are actually going to make a huge difference to the carbon output from transport.
Chris talks about lifting up the weights of the drum mixers to 38 to create a level playing field. They can carry 8 metres. He says struggle sometimes, but they can carry 8 metres at 32 tonnes. So, and we can carry 8 metres at 38 tonnes. So by giving them the 38 tonne as a operating, they'll be at 10 and 11 cubic metres. So the level playing field is just gone out the window on load. Yeah.
It's become a hill.
I think the thing, going back to Mr. Hamilton's basement, it sounds like you had a very good experience with your concrete. But I mean, Chris talks about us being in competition. We are not in competition with MPA members. Your members are the ones that supply us our cement and our aggregates. But yeah, so Mr. Hamilton, your basement, I don't know whether you had any concrete left over that they had to just discard, but a lot of the time the volumetrics are doing the smaller jobs that the big guys don't want to do, and it's things like that where your builder doesn't know whether it's 1.7 metres or 2.2 metres, and they're the jobs we primarily do. We're not looking to do the big jobs, and drum mixers are superb at what they do. And that is doing a big job and getting the concrete there as quick as you can. But the smaller jobs, where you are unsure about the size, that's the ones where the volumetrics come into their own. And that's where we are, a lot of the time, admittedly, the drum mixers might not bring back any waste, but there might be a quarter of a cube left on site, a half a cube left on site. And that's where the volumetrics come into their own, really.
Again, I wouldn't disagree that there is there are jobs which are ideally placed for volumetrics, but truck mixers of all sizes, because we've talked a lot about 8 metre truck mixers, and in fact there's an awful lot of 6 metre truck mixers on the road, and indeed there are some smaller mini mixers on the road. So the realm of the small customer isn't only that of volumetric trucks. I think that again we should just come back to a level playing field and let the operators of these various vehicles, fight it out with fair competition, which we've been doing for a long time. It's not correct to say that ready-mix producers, large or small, aren't interested in small jobs. Of course they are, and they deliver very successfully to an awful lot of small jobs. And volumetric operators deliver very successfully to a lot of small jobs too.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Again, Carl, then Fabian wants to ask some supplementaries. Carl.
Thank you, Chairman. Chris Lee's going to come back to you because you keep banging on about level playing fields, and I get that you're representing the people that employ you, but it's a bit of smoke and mirrors as far as I'm concerned. We've already pointed out the change in costs in the two different types of vehicles. As Chris Smith has said, and you've just countered some of what you've said, if everybody can carry 8 cubic metres worth, that's a level playing field. Those who've got volumetric cement mixers have obviously got the added cost of buying those vehicles. Your members with their drum mixers are buying a cheaper vehicle. If it's a level playing field, surely it's whether it's the amount of product that's being carried. And what I'd like to ask you is particularly, what's the breakdown in the percentage of the business? So how many, in a 100% business of cement provision, how much is provided by drum mixers and how much is provided by volumetric cement?
How much is provided by...
Percentage-wise, what's the breakdown in the sector?
I don't
roughly
know that number. I think you said you do...
about 10% of the concrete industry is now volumetrics.
And that's been for the last, since 75? Or obviously you've built up when there's only one vehicle that's gone up. Has it been roughly about that over the past whatever years?
The last 10 to 15 years, I think.
So come back on your point about level playing field, though, if I may. So it's not just about the cost of the truck, because, if we want to start building a ready-mix concrete plant in order to feed that truck, then you're looking at, best part of 1.62 million pounds.
I understand there's economic impacts all the way through the sector,
exactly.
And what decisions are made and what regulations are put in place. And I think we as regulators or the Department of Transport need to look at what, they'll talk about environmental impacts, and we can talk about electric powered vehicles being much heavier permanently, whereas at least all of your trucks, when they've delivered their cement, are going to be lighter, less wear on the roads, is a point I'd make. But ultimately, it's how in the future we can move forward with everybody being able to continue operating as they have done in the past but on a level playing field where everybody can carry surely the same amount of product?
Well, I would say that that the right decision was made previously, and I appreciate that these guys won't agree, but I would say that the right decision was made previously, and that you know, taking into account safety, wear and tear, and level playing field, that the playing field is pretty level at 32 tonnes on 4 axles.
Do you like to see volumetric provision completely removed then from the market? But that's what you and your members would like to see.
No, I've said to you that
some
of our members operate
unviable then.
Sorry, I've said to you, no, I don't believe it would be unviable. And when I was responsible for running volumetric trucks and introduced them into the company that I previously worked for, in fact, we made the active decision to run them at 32 tonnes. With full, in those days, it was before the decision had been made about O licences and all the other things, but we ran them as HGVs.
Sorry, just because Mr. Payne raised my basement, I don't want to make this about that, but he raised a very important point. You did raise a very important point. I, as an ignorant member of the public, I had no idea about volumetric mixers versus the other type. We didn't use 2 cubic metres in the end. I thought we would need it, but of course, what do I know? I organised it myself. It wasn't a builder that did it. And in the end, it was, I think, 1.7. But the point is, we had two vehicles out there. I didn't know we had to have 2 vehicles because I just didn't know how it worked. And that greatly increased the cost to me, but also the number of vehicles on the road. It was quite shocking. But had I known about volumetric, it would have been far, far easier and better.
0.3 meter, 0.3 of a cubic meter. You know, if you look over the, let's say that, you know, the average load size for volumetric is 3 meters. So if he goes out in the morning loaded with 9 meters and he does 3 jobs, you know, that's 0.3. That's 0.9 of a cubic meter. So almost a cubic meter he is saving a day by people not knowing exactly what they need. And that is the nature of the business. And the big jobs, you know, where they're having 100, 200 metres of concrete, they can wait and call in the last load and say, we need 3 metres for the last load instead of 8. But the smaller jobs are the ones where the volumetric come into their own, as yours was. And, you know, there is other jobs where they might be a little bit out on their depth, and then they need another 0.3 instead of having a 0.3 left over. And the beauty of the volumetric is they can just stop at that point.
What is the proportion? I mean, we've already done this. It's about 10%, is it, of all concrete? Does that equate to the number of vehicles? So is it 90% conventional mixers and 10% volumetric?
I think we said, you say 1,000 vehicles on the road, we say 4,200 or thereabouts truck mixers on the road, so it's 20%.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Want to move on to the questions and the consultation?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I wanted to move on to the way the department has run the consultation, the Transport Department. I mean, why do you think that the department is holding this consultation instead of just letting the framework that was adopted in 2018 play out? Is there any particular reason we're having another consultation?
Well, basically, we've gone back and said, that 10-year rule is not going to work. We've tried all the lighter lorries. We've tried to run it for 32 tonnes. At 32 tonnes, a lorry gets less than 7 metres, which isn't a level playing field. My lorries, even at 44 tonne, we get no payload advantage. We're still only carrying between 8 and 9 metres because of the extra equipment. But the flexibility we have with the pump, and I think flexibility is a word that hasn't been used much here. Volumetrics bring total flexibility to the sector. Ready mix are great at what they do. Big jobs in and out all day long. A volumetric can sit there, wait. For example, last Christmas we done the Kentish Town Railway Bridge for Bam Nuttall. All over the Christmas period, we had lorries just sitting there for hours on end until they said, right, Rick, put in the concrete quickly. Where they pulled an old bridge off and there's a danger. That flexibility can only be redone with volumetrics. Luckily, we actually used our pump as well because we were pumping down to the line. It's that flexibility in this end of the sector that is crucial.
I think that the period of consultation you are referring to, I think it was expected that technology and we would be able to reduce the weight of the lorries in this time and it's just not feasible, which is why we are revisiting it, because we have tried everything we can and we cannot get down to that weight that they are expecting us to get to.
How effectively do you feel that the department and the DVSA collaborate with your sector on regulatory issues, Mr. Leese?
I think that we think fine on policy issues. It's an area that I'm briefed on rather than engaged with every day. But we are approached for relevant things. I'm told, such as the road investment strategy. We've had supply chain workshops. We've met with the rail minister and the road minister recently, and we get approached when relevant. The DVSA, we have. As a trade body, we have less contact with, but our members would probably engage more with the DVSA. Again, as MPA and as an industry, I hope it's not expanding the question too far. We also engage on various road safety initiatives. So Cycle Safe, for example, has been a big part of what the MPA has been involved with. Recently, we've formed a collaboration with Driving for Better Business. And I would say, and as I say, I'm briefed that the contact is fine. It works.
Do you agree with that?
No, we have no contact at all.
Okay.
Apart from this process of reviewing the 2018 stuff, there's no contact.
Okay.
I would agree with Chris, and I think maybe they consult with the MPA more than they do us, because you are, your members, are multinational companies, and maybe hold a bit more clout than we do.
I really must just. I'm not going to disagree with too much of that, other than to say, please, can we just get away from the notion that the MPA just represents multinational businesses. We represent businesses of all sizes. It happens that the larger producers in the UK are also members of the MPA, but there are many small and medium-sized enterprises which are also members of the MPA.
What has the government told you about the likely next steps and timescales for any decisions?
On their review?
Mr. Smith.
None at the moment. We've actually asked our MPs to go and ask when we'd like to hear some sort of response.
Mr. Payne, have they told you anything?
No.
Please?
I'm not aware that we've been told anything.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Government timelines for responding to consultations are flexible, to use the word of the morning. Gavin, turn to you now.
I'm not sure flexible is the word I would use, Chair, but thanks very much and good morning. Now, we've touched on this already this morning, but just to set this in concrete, if you will, in terms of the three options that are in the consultation, if I can just go to the three of you in terms of your preferred option, or indeed if you have another option that you prefer to see that are not in the list, because obviously we've got maintaining the current exceptional temporary arrangement, we've got allowing the VCMs to operate the weights of the temporary VSOs if there's the advanced route notifications, and then we've got allow for the further VSOs to, until further notice, subject to various things, vehicle age, etc., etc. So I'll just go from left to right. Mr. Leese, what would your preferred option be out of three options?
Well, I think you won't be surprised.
No, I wasn't. I didn't think it would be, but
no, that we think the right decision was made, so we would go for the status quo. In terms of the prior notice, I'm sure that's not going to work for these guys. Look, nor indeed for our members who operate VCMs. In terms of earned recognition, well, we already work with earned recognition, and of course the principle of earned recognition is that for doing the right, putting it very simplistically, for doing the right things, you get to be inspected and regulated, inspected less, as it were. And I suppose if you were going to go, if the decision was to go for 38 tonnes on 4 axles, just to keep it simple, with earned recognition, then you would find the MPA lobbying for the same for truck mixers.
Which was obviously we've covered already, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, my the thing would be for the VSO to be continued indefinitely. The earned recognition, I think, would be very difficult. A lot of volumetric companies are small businesses, I think Chris said, with 2 or less trucks.
Can maybe, if you go into a bit of detail on that for us, what would that entail for a small business? You said it would be quite difficult because of the size of some of the businesses.
Just the cost of it. I'm not. Chris will know more than me on the earned recognition schemes, but I mean, it's normally for bigger companies who can have someone looking at these bits full time for them. I don't know, Chris. You know a bit more about that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Tesco's, Sainsbury's, them sort of guys make up the bulk of the earned recognition members. Yeah, they've got brand new lorries, they've got huge departments to look after them. They'll go back to the main dealer for everything. Yeah, so there is a lot of extra paperwork. We actually, when this was floated a couple of months ago, we actually got a consultant in who would actually get you through into the earned recognition. He came into us and said, okay, yeah, your paperwork's fine, yeah, your reports are fine, but yeah, there's a lot more work that's got to be done. And no one, I know, has been forced into this. We had a Zoom with the head of earned recognition. So it's a lot more pressure and a lot more work on small businesses. There are a few advantages there. You might not get pulled as much. They see you come down the road, they put your number plate into the system, and they go, oh, he's on earned, they let you go by unless they can see something obvious, you know? Yeah. The advance notices, I don't know why they've even floated that again, because prior to 18, that was one of their suggestions going forward, and we explained then that we can't do 2 days notice. You know, if you're moving a wind turbine, you've got months to plan. You know, our industry, people ring up the morning of the job and say, oh, our inspector just come, can I have some concrete this afternoon, please? You know, it's just totally, I don't know why they even suggested it. And there's been...
Forgive me, I mean, I can understand why they have put that in if one of the concerns is, you know, 38 tonnes and the impact on particular roads and particularly bridges. But if there's a practical reason, then...
2017 said that we're okay on bridges. Yeah, so yeah, that goes around in circles a little bit, that one.
It's more for practical reasons rather than anything else. You know, concrete is generally sort of 48 hours before when people are ordering it, or same day, you know, so then they wouldn't work having to give that notice.
Yeah, or someone orders it on the expectation that the inspectors come in the morning to pass that hole. Yeah, a lot of times they ring up and say, "Oh, sod it, they didn't pass my hole. I don't want it today." So you can't send, you wouldn't be able to send that lorry anywhere else.
No.
Yeah, and so the status quo. I mean, there's been no big problems since 2018 that we're aware of that would actually say, "All right, you got it. We can't take it off you because of the weight differences and keeping that sort of 8 metre thing, but we want some more regulation to keep it." That hasn't happened. So I don't know why they want to force us down that road either.
Yeah, and I suppose looking at the various options, this is a question for you guys. I'll start with you, Chris Smith. In terms of the 3 options, what proportion of the current VCM fleet would be able to keep operating under each of the 3 potential options?
Well, nobody would be able to go on the advance.
Yeah.
On the leaving the status quo for 2028, yeah, us personally as a business, Mixamay, we would be out of business because we're running all our 25 trucks. I've got the pumps on board, run 44 tonnes. Yeah, so we just couldn't do it. If we actually went down to a 4-axle at 32, we'd be carrying 5 cubic metres, which is just totally uneconomical. You couldn't make any money at that. Yeah. Most people would just want to stay with what we've got now. And now we went back with a 4th option, and our 4th option was just to leave it as it is, as a permanent, with a caveat in there saying if things went really wrong, you could revisit it.
I would say if the VSO was continued indefinitely, then there would be no issue. Everyone would carry on. The prior notice, I think, as we've explained, I think would be unusable. So I think you would see 95% of the volumetric producers leaving the industry. The earned recognition, I think there would be a handful of people who would be big enough to do it. And I'm sure Chris, whether he has the numbers or not, I don't know, would be able to tell you not all of the MPA members would be members who are using earned recognition. Some of the smaller members I'm sure aren't. And again, I would say 90% of volumetric producers would stop doing it if they had to then go under that scheme.
And can you I'm sorry to be a bit dimmer on this. Can you just explain a little bit more about what's involved with earned recognition? What are the DVSA looking at? I mean, you said paperwork, but precisely what
every piece of paperwork and every inspection you do, you have to then send off to the ministry as well. Yeah.
What volumes, weights, times?
More of inspections, walk-arounds. Every morning, every driver of any HGV has to do a walk-around nowadays. It's normally on an app. Yeah. All those records have to be made available to the department. All your records from your 6-week lease have to be sent there. Chris is nodding. And obviously your MOT results, everything you do on paper has to be sent into the ministry.
I think a lot of companies use a consultant to come in and do that for them, which obviously there's a cost to that, and to our members, I think that is a cost that they wouldn't be able to stomach.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose just the last question from each here. If you were allowed to continue operating or at the upper level, but with this scheme, and I'd fully accept the costs and the implications and what have you, might not that be the least worst option for the sector rather than the current arrangement?
Well, no, I think obviously the best option would be.
Well, that's why I use the term least possible.
I think whether we could do an earned recognition system within the Batch on Site Association, where every volumetric has to be a member of the Batch on Site Association and abide by certain rules and things like that. But like I said, I'm quite lucky, and Chris is quite lucky, because we are quite big producers, and there is a few of them out there with mixed fleets, and people with a mixed fleet who have drum mixers as well as volumetrics, will have the capacity to do the earned recognition. But the small family business with 2 or 3 trucks, I think, would struggle and say, well, as you alluded to earlier, the price, I've got £1 million worth of kit here, why don't I sell them and reinvest it somewhere else, which is going to be a bit easier on me.
Okay, I lied, Chair, so a quick last question from Mr. Leese. If these guys, and I call myself a politician, if these guys, the BSA, were to get their way, and the DFT and DVSA were to change their current approach, obviously you guys would lobby hard, etc., against it. Would you guys be thinking of potential legal action?
I can't.
I wasn't expecting.
No, I can't comment. I can't comment. I can't comment on that. I just don't know the answer. Just don't know the answer to that. But there's a couple of points I would like to make in relation to what you said a moment ago. I think the first thing is we heard a moment ago that at 38.4 tonnes on 4 axles, the payload would be reduced to 5 cubic metres. I think somewhere in your own evidence it says 6.5 to 7 metres. So some clarification is potentially
on Chris's lorries with the pumps.
Right. Okay. So if you're carrying a pump, so if a truck mixer was carrying a pump, then it would probably be able to carry, 5 to 6 metres. So broadly similar. And I think that to get back to the point that. Actually, road wear and tear is an issue, and I think DFT themselves say that 38 tonnes on 4 axles is a huge magnitude of proportion greater wear and tear on the road than 32 tonnes on 4 axles, and we could come back to you with some more on that and sort of where our evidence comes from if that helps. But I think if you were minded to say to these guys, 38.4 tonnes on 4 axles is fine, then let's do that for truck mixers, let's do it for tippers, let's have less vehicles on the road, less vehicle movements, and less carbon, all the things that we've talked about from vehicle movements.
Okay, in terms of that evidence, clearly aware of the National Highways or Highways England, who looked at it again. Obviously, I know in 2017 it was fine, but then thereafter it wasn't, apparently, according to that kind of investigation report by National Highways, Highways England. I can't remember what it was at that particular time. Is there any other evidence in terms of international? Is there anything within this? Because I know that in Europe still higher weights are allowed. So is there evidence from elsewhere that would perhaps rebut some of the National Highways report?
Chris can tell you because he sells trucks out to Europe, Italy and places. I don't know whether we're aligned with Europe or not at the moment, but as terms of
Sadly not too much.
yeah, in terms of
I don't know if you missed it. We're out.
I don't know whether we are out or not.
I know.
yeah,
I'm kidding.
in terms of weight, I think France for an 8-wheeler 4-axle truck is 38 tons. I think down in Italy they're up near 40 tons. The Netherlands are more
50.
50 tons in the Netherlands. So.
Yeah.
But in terms of any evidence of wear and tear on the roads, is there anything else to point to other than the
I'm assuming
what DFT are working with?
I'm assuming they presume there is no extra wear and tear, otherwise they would reduce the weights on their lorries.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you. Unless any other colleague wants to catch my eye, I think we've concluded our questions, but I'd just like to give each of you the opportunity to put on record any other points that we haven't covered. So go down the line, Mr. Leese. Turn to you first.
Yeah, there are a number of issues, criticisms that have been raised by BSA about truck mixers, everything from operating in rural areas to shelf life of ready mixed concrete to waste to pumps to wastewater. I won't take your time up now going through rebutting each of those. What we will do is take the opportunity perhaps just to write in further evidence, if that's okay.
And it's an open invitation. If any of you want to supplement the points you've made this morning with further evidence, that's perfectly acceptable. Thank you. Mr. Payne.
I bought my first truck in 2008, and since then it's taken us this long to grow. And I think the fact that we have grown so big and the volumetrics have become an issue for the MPA, it just shows that there is the market out there, that this was something that was needed and customers were calling for it, because customers are what make the company grow. And if the companies weren't growing, and then, like I said, if there was £55 million worth of new trucks sold before the 2008 regulation change, when it went down to £9 million worth of trucks, that shows to me that there is a huge demand out there.
Just as COVID occurred.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith.
One quick point that Chris just put up. If you brought us down to 32 tons, a ready-mix lorry could carry a pump and they would only do 5 metres. But earlier on he said that's why they stopped doing it. It wasn't economical. That's why you don't get ready-mix trucks in this country with pumps on, because they can't make money.
Focused on payload.
Yeah, payload. And where payload is the level playing field. And I think from the questions today, I think nearly every member here has got this argument. And I really appreciate your homework, fellas. Yeah. So, yeah, it's going forward. It's that payload and the extra tear weight that we carry that is the crucial matter.
A drum mixer with a pump on it, as Chris said, they've obviously tried that and it didn't work. So the way to cut the weight for them was get rid of the pump. That's them saving weight. The way to save weight on a volumetric has been tried, and we've saved a ton. We can't take off 3 tons of pump overnight at the click of our fingers. They have done everything they can to reduce the weights of these lorries, and it's not feasible, and safety-wise it's not going to be possible.
Thank you all very much indeed for your time and evidence this morning. We're very grateful. But for now, order. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.